Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's live broadcast, a case study on Netsuite ERP optimized for clinical and commercial pharmaceuticals with Galera and Nabriva Therapeutics. I'm Lisa Henderson, the Editorial Director of Pharmaceutical Executive, and I'll be your moderator for today's event. We are pleased to bring you this webcast presented by Pharmaceutical Executive and sponsored by Adaptologics. I would now like to share a statement from our sponsor. Adaptologics has taken the world's most mature and capable cloud computing ERP system and tailored it to the complex needs of pre-revenue pharmaceutical, biotechnology, and medical device companies. Their expertise in pharma comes from former pharma staff across all departments that recognize the need for Tier 1 ERP and MRP solutions without the required resources of a Tier 1 solution. Since its inception, Adaptologics' mission has been to deliver complete white-glove ERP, MRP deployments exclusively to the pharmaceutical industry. We have a few important announcements before we begin. This webcast is designed to be interactive, and we encourage you to ask questions during the event. You can submit questions by typing them in the Q&A box, which can be found on the right-hand side of your screen. You can enlarge your slide window by clicking on the small square icon in the upper right-hand corner of the slide window, or by hovering your mouse over the lower right-hand corner and dragging the window to the desired size. Your slides will advance automatically during the event. If you have any technical problems viewing or hearing this presentation, please click on the question mark help widget in the dock at the bottom of your presentation window. And before I introduce today's speakers, I'd like to ask our audience to participate in two brief polling questions. So you can see the first question right there. Do you manufacture in-house or do you leverage a CMO? Just choose your answer and click Submit. So I'll just give you that again. Do you manufacture in-house or do you leverage a CMO? Thank you for participating. We're going to go into the next question. Are you managing your clinical trials expense accruals, and how many hours do you spend weekly managing your contracts? This is an open-ended question, so we'll give you some time to type that in and hit Submit. Again, are you managing your clinical trials expense accruals, and how many hours do you spend weekly managing your contracts? And thank you for participating in that question. We're now going to move over and introduce today's speakers. We are pleased to be joined today by James Neal from Adaptologics, Chris Degnan from Galera Therapeutics, and Lauren Piunti from Nabriva Therapeutics. So if you just wanted to say a few words about yourself and your company, James, did you want to start?
Hi, thanks. This is James Neal. I started in ERP systems over 25 years ago and started working with pharmaceuticals 18 years ago. Back in 2016, started Adaptologics with the goal of really providing ERP solutions directly to the pharma and biotech industry. Since then, we've deployed more than 30 companies, GMP build-outs, as well as CMO structured companies all the way through commercialization.
Great. And Chris, did you want to add some to your bio? Please, thanks.
Thank you. Pleased to join you today. I'm Chris Stegnan, the Chief Financial Officer for Galera Therapeutics. I began my career at KPMG and have been working in the pharmaceutical industry in various finance roles for close to 17 years. I worked at AstraZeneca for over 10 years and also worked at Endo Pharmaceuticals and was the CFO at Verica Pharmaceuticals before joining Galera in 2019. Galera is a clinical stage biopharmaceutical company focused on developing therapeutics that have the potential to transform radiotherapy and cancer. Our product candidates have the potential to work on both sides of the therapeutic index, meaning the potential to reduce normal tissue toxicity from radiotherapy and also increase the anti-cancer efficacy of radiotherapy. I look forward to speaking more about Galera and our ERP system needs today, and I'll turn it over to Lauren.
Thanks, Chris. My name is Lauren Piunti, and I'm the Associate Director of Finance and Operations at Nabriva Therapeutics. I started working for Nabriva in 2015 for our U.S. entity as an accountant, where I helped with our ERP system implementation, accounting for the U.S. books, SOX compliance. And then in 2019, I moved to Dublin, Ireland to manage financial supply chain, process our financial consolidations, SOX compliance, and I also manage our ERP system. Nabriva Therapeutics is a biopharmaceutical company engaged in the commercialization and development of anti-infective agents to treat serious infections. So far, we have one approved product, Zenleta, which we commercialize in the U.S. for CAP, which is community-acquired bacterial pneumonia. And this has also been approved in Canada and Europe as well. We recently licensed the U.S. rights to Cevextro from Merck, which is for acute bacterial skin and skin structure infections. And then lastly, we have one product development candidate, Contipo, which is indicated for complicated urinary tract infections.
Excellent, thank you. So for some more information about what you're doing, how many FTEs do you have and how many people are on your team? Chris?
Sure. So at Galera, we have close to 40 employees, and there are 5 of us on the finance team.
Excellent. Lauren?
At Nabriva, we have between 90 and 100 full-time employees, and we have about 10 on the finance team.
Okay. And James?
Yeah, on the AdaptLogic side, we are at 34 employees right now, and that's actually across the globe. We are the largest single vertical Netsuite dealer out there at that 34 employees.
Excellent. So Chris and Lauren, you did speak somewhat to the indications that you're in and what kind of drugs you're developing. Did either one of you want to expand on what you originally offered the audience?
Sure, this is Chris. I won't dive too far into the science, but just to give you some context and background on what we're doing at Galera. We're developing a portfolio of small molecule dismutase mimetics, which they basically do one thing. They convert superoxide into hydrogen peroxide. So when a cancer patient receives radiotherapy, the radiation induces a burst of superoxide, which is damaging to their normal cells, which can cause normal tissue toxicities. And conversely, hydrogen peroxide is more damaging to cancer cells. So by converting superoxide to hydrogen peroxide, our product candidates have demonstrated an ability to actually increase the anti-cancer efficacy of high-dose radiation. So our lead indication is for the reduction of severe oral mucositis in patients with head and neck cancer. The standard of care for locally advanced head and neck cancer patients is radiation therapy plus cisplatin, which is a chemotherapy drug. And they're given that over a 7-week treatment period. And oral mucositis is the most burdensome side effect of the radiation therapy for these patients. About 70% of these patients will develop what's called severe oral mucositis, which is development of so many ulcers and pain in their mouth that they can no longer eat or drink. And so in 2017, we announced results from a phase 2B 223 patient trial with our lead product candidate, which is called avazepam. And there we demonstrated the ability to reduce the incidence and duration and severity of SOM in patients with head and neck cancer. And then in 2018, we got breakthrough therapy designation from the FDA, and we are currently in a 450-patient phase 3 registrational trial for this indication. And then lastly, we're also developing avazepam for the reduction of normal tissue toxicity from radiotherapy. We're also looking at our products to, like I said, increase the anti-cancer efficacy of higher daily dose of radiation in patients with both locally advanced pancreatic cancer and also a trial for patients with non-small cell lung cancer.
Thank you, Chris. And Lauren, did you want to add anything?
Sure. As previously mentioned, Zenleta was approved by the FDA for the indication of CAP in 2019. So this is currently commercialized in the U.S. and has also been approved in Canada and Europe. And then in July of last year, so of 2020, we entered into a distribution agreement with Merck. So we have the rights to distribute the product Cevextro in the United States. And Sevextra is approved for the treatment of acute bacterial skin and skin structure infections. And then lastly is a product candidate, Contipo, which we're currently seeking approval for treatment of complicated urinary tract infections.
Okay, great. And how many clinical trials are you running, Lauren?
We currently have 2 phase 1 clinical trials for lefamulin and IV phosphomycin.
And Chris?
We currently have 7 trials in our clinical stage pipeline. So we have 3 in the reducing normal toxicity realm. One of them is the phase 3 that I mentioned, and then we have 2 other phase 2 trials there, and then we have 3 trials focused on increasing the anti-cancer efficacy with high-dose radiation. And then finally, we have a pilot phase 2 trial ongoing for critically ill patients with COVID.
Okay, great. So as far as your timeline to commercialization, Chris, since you have those 7 trials going on, what does that look like?
So as I mentioned, we are in phase 3 registrational trial for our lead indication, and that's for the reduction of severe ormucositis in patients with head and neck cancer. What we said publicly is that we expect to complete the enrollment of that trial in the first half of this year, 2021, and announce top-line results in the second half of this year. And if the results are positive, we do plan to submit a new drug application to the FDA.
Excellent. That's exciting. And Lauren, you were talking about the drugs that you currently have on the market. Do you have a timeline for new applications or candidates?
We don't at the moment, just due to the COVID restrictions.
Okay, yeah. I guess that has been an impact for everyone. Okay, great. Thank you so much. Let's switch some gears. We're going to go into our next set of questions, the what questions, and we're going to talk about some of your technology needs. So as you move forward to and through commercialization, what are some of the biggest hurdles you anticipate in the future? And I'm going to ask that of you, Chris.
Thanks. So as a newly public company and from an ERP system perspective, we're initially focused on reporting, SOX compliance, accounts payable activities, including purchase orders and contract management, as well as budgeting and forecasting. And then as we move forward in anticipation of potential commercialization, that's when supply chain, inventory management, revenue, and gross to net accounting will come into greater focus for us.
Okay. And then how did you previously handle your consolidations and eliminations considering your global footprint?
Yeah, so we do have an Australian subsidiary. The trial balances and financial statements for each of our subsidiaries is maintained in our financial system of record, and then we download those statements and handle consolidations and eliminations in Excel.
And Lauren, do you have insight on that?
Yeah, so we previously used Excel as well for consolidations and eliminations because we had 2 different financial systems. We had one in the U.S. and then one in Europe. So we used Excel to combine the data. But now that we're on Netsuite, this process is automated. So we're able to use Netsuite to do the consolidations and eliminations.
Yeah. So Chris, in regard to the challenges going public, or specifically, how did you manage SOX compliance?
Sure. I wouldn't describe them as challenges necessarily, but certainly as a new public company, we want to ensure we have the systems, operational infrastructure, and controls in place to make sure we're compliant with our audit, SEC, and SOX 404 requirements. We do work with an outside advisory firm for our SOX 404 compliance program. Program includes documenting our key controls, testing them, and reporting on the operating effectiveness of our controls. And the more we can leverage with our systems and automate our controls, the better.
Excellent. Okay, so now we're going to talk about how did you manage your accounting, budgeting, and accruals? And I'll start with Lauren.
Sure. So prior to moving to Netsuite, as I had mentioned before, we had 2 separate financial systems, one in the U.S. and one in Europe. So the accounting was done completely separate. And then quarterly, we had to combine all of the accounting outside of the system. So we again use Excel for accounting and then as well for budgeting and accruals.
And Chris?
Sure. And for the context of the audience, we're in the process of implementing NetSuite. So currently our analysis supporting our accruals are generally done in Excel with input from our business partners and our vendors. Accounting transactions, journal entries are booked and managed in our general ledger system, our financial system of record. As I mentioned, consolidations and eliminations are done in Excel. And then from a budgeting and performance reporting perspective, comparing actuals to budget, that's also done in Excel.
And then in regard to your supply chain, what challenges or barriers were presented with having outsourced manufacturing? Chris?
The key there with any outsourced provider is just ensuring timely billing and reporting to support our financial close processes.
Do you agree, Lauren, or anything specific to agree with that?
I would agree. I think one of our biggest challenges is just coordinating with all of our external contract manufacturing organizations. So making sure we get all of the data on time. And then since we are on board with NetSuite and using NetSuite, we really utilize NetSuite to capture and record all of the inventory movements.
So let's start into the when. So when you started to look at systems that meet your needs. So when did it become apparent that you needed a more encompassing solution? Chris?
It was clear for me when I joined Galera, and that's based on my previous roles and experience having come into a company in a similar stage of development and newly public, that we needed a more robust system that could scale with our business. As a newly public company with a growing clinical pipeline, we needed a system that could provide efficiencies in AP and contract management, reporting, and SOX compliance. As we hopefully move towards commercialization, we needed a system better equipped to manage supply chain, inventory, and revenue processes and transactions.
And Lauren?
Yeah, so we were in the clinical trial phase of our drugs in LETA when we decided to upgrade our financial system. As I mentioned, we were using 2 different ERP systems, so we really needed one global solution to handle the accounting for all entities and to also help simplify the reporting process. And we also wanted to do this prior to commercialization.
So what went into the evaluation process, and what team did you put together to lead that evaluation? Chris?
For us, it was finding a solution that meets the needs of the company now, while also being able to scale to meet the future demands of the company. So an ERP system is a long-term commitment from a company. Current and future functionality needs are critical in the assessment. The core team in the evaluation process were members of our finance and IT teams, but we also sought input from members of the management team across the business, as well as our audit committee.
And Lauren?
Yeah, so we had a small finance team of probably about 5 employees at the time. So we actually worked directly with James to find a solution that worked for our company. We were growing quickly, so we knew we needed to upgrade to a better system, but we wanted something that wasn't overly complex or too robust. So James had introduced us to NetSuite, which was targeted more towards small to mid-sized pharma companies, and it had all the features that we were looking for, specifically around the supply chain module, budgeting, and reporting. And it also had a lot of customizable options that really worked for us.
So James, when do you start getting engaged with the companies? When is the right time to start looking and have a system implemented?
Yeah, it's a good question. We get asked a lot by prospects we talk to and different companies we talk to. It's on a couple different things, and it's different by company. So, we can say generally it's around phase 2, maybe later in phase 2B, phase 3, but really it depends on the complexity of the company. Like Chris was saying earlier, if you're a public company that's getting hit for, more auditable systems, that's one area of complexity. The second is global operations. So you end up, spending a lot of time doing consolidations and eliminations and handling, intercompany service agreements. That's another complexity that drives, you to a more sophisticated system. and then number of people and number of clinical trials. So, by the time you get to, closer to commercialization and that complexity of the number of vendors you're paying and the types of contracts and the number of people that you have in the organization, the systems that are generally in place, the QuickBooks and the Excel spreadsheets start to take more time to manage and become less auditable and less reliable, as that complexity grows. So we often tell people, as early as practical, but or as late as practical, as early as possible. So meaning, you definitely want to get in before commercial because you're going crazy at that point. It's preferable to get in even before the massive growth starts. But as late as practical, because you don't want a team of 2 people in the finance team running a true ERP. So as late as practical and as early as possible.
So Chris and Lauren, start with Chris. How long did your implementations take?
So we purposely build in additional time for the implementation to allow for downtime in the implementation process when the finance team is heavily focused on quarter-end activities. That said, our implementation from start to finish will take approximately 6 months.
And Lauren?
Yeah, so ours is very similar, except we split our implementation into 2 phases. So we implemented Netsuite for our U.S. entity, and then a year later we implemented Netsuite in Europe. And I think both probably took somewhere between 4 to 6 months.
Okay. And then how much does that time schedule vary depending on the models, James?
Yeah, it's usually about, what Chris and Lauren experienced, anywhere from 3 to 6 months. Three months is really, if you have to do it, there's something really driving it, and your team just needs to get there, right? That is close to a disruptive schedule. Out in the 4 months, 5 months is more practical, because you got to remember everybody's going through everything else, right? It's not just the implementation. So, our team, and your implementation team can run very fast, but we often look at the customer's team and say, okay, what else do you have going on? A comfort level of 4 to 6 months, that's comfortable. You start to get into supply chain and GMP, those are much bigger projects. And then you start, after you get the financials in place, then you're looking at 6 and 9 month deliveries, but those are much bigger manufacturing projects.
So then what are the benefits to getting engaged sooner?
That's one of those things that, I can tell you at least 1 out of every 2 people that we talk to, that are getting ready to engage with us, the first thing they say is, we're probably too early for this. And, it's easy to ask the question, and it's generally never too early to ask the question, is it too early for this? Where we generally see the problem is if wait's too long. We've had a couple of instances in our history where, our clients have, gotten behind the 8 ball right up against commercialization, and it's very difficult to do, both the implementation and commercialization. Commercialization wins every time. So getting this stuff in first, and there's different models. So, getting financials in first, like Chris and Lauren were talking about, getting that base functionality in, so then your system is stable and ready for growth. Getting it in earlier rather than, when you need it versus after you need it. Is generally preferable because it's much easier, much less expensive, easier as you bring in more staff to train them on the current system rather than training them on a system that's going to be replaced. A lot of reasons to get in earlier, but it's always easy to ask the question, does this make sense now? And the sooner you start asking those questions, the better answers you get.
So, Chris, how did you hear about Netsuite?
So I initially heard about Netsuite through discussions and recommendations from my peers in pharma. It seemed to be the most commonly recommended ERP system for a company of our size and stage of development. And then I did have experience actually implementing NetSuite with support from Adaptologics at a previous company as well.
Okay. And Lauren?
Yeah, similarly, we had colleagues who had previously worked with James. So we talked to James, and he introduced us to NetSuite.
And how long have you been using it for, Lauren?
I think it's been about 5 years now.
Okay. Chris?
So as I mentioned, we're in the steps of finalizing the implementation now at Galera, but then I've used NetSuite a couple years at one of my previous companies.
And James? How long have you been using it?
Yeah, so funny you ask that because we actually started with Nabriva as our first customer.
Okay.
So when Lauren says we did the evaluation, we literally evaluated all the software packages out there at that time. And, through going through the selection process, we found NetSuite was the best one. And then we built the Adaptologics around that. So, about as long as Lauren's been using it.
That's great. All right, so let's move over now into the how. So how do you meet your requirements? So let's start with a question to all of you. What are the benefits of having an industry-specific partner in selecting your ERP? Choosing. And I'll start with James, and then we'll go around the table. James, Chris, and then Lauren.
Yeah, and this really goes in, again, being in the industry for 25 years, one of the things that you find in deployments of accounting system, ERP systems is, if you can find the ability you find the ability to repeat, the deployment, it takes out a lot of the risk. So why we chose to do this as just supporting pharma and biotech, and that's it. That's all we do, is because, we see the same thing day in and day out. If one of our customers has a problem with something, all of our customers are going to have a problem with something. So it makes it much easier on us. It makes it much easier on our customers. It makes it much easier for our deployments. They get basically more out of the deployment because it's been there, done that. So that's why we chose to, really become very industry specific, and that's why we go down that path.
To build on that, I mean, James's experience and the team's experience at Adaptologics certainly helps. I mean, they understand the nuances of the pharmaceutical industry and our business model, and they help design and tailor the system to meet our current needs, always with an eye towards and what the company will need in the future, certainly as we hope to approach commercialization as a company. And really that experience and guidance is invaluable in an ERP implementation.
Great. And Lauren?
Yes, I would agree. I think the biggest benefit for us is the knowledge that Adaptologics provides. Their team has a lot of experience within the pharma industry, so we really value their consulting advice, and they always have solutions to any problems that we run into. They're extremely helpful as well when we're deciding on any system enhancements or upgrades, specifically because Adaptologics works with a lot of clients who are similar to us, so they're able to provide us with input on what has worked well for companies who are in a similar position to us.
Okay, great. And then James, why was NetSuite chosen as your platform?
So as I talked about earlier, when we chose that with Nabriva and one of our other customers who again, were all, all people that we knew through previous companies, and we went through that selection process, and what we found with NetSuite was it handled multiple geographies very well. So Nabriva is a perfect example where they have, how many different geographies, Lauren, are you guys reporting in? Like 3 or 4, like Ireland?
Yeah, I think we're up to 4. Yep.
Yeah. So NetSuite actually handles 4 different countries' reportings out of the box. I mean, there wasn't like we went in and customized any of these reports, any of the statutory reporting. It just handles it. It handles, multiple books, consolidation. So we can consolidate in euros as well as US dollar if that's required. We can actually put books into statutory, into a particular country, so you can do, book-specific entries. So it handles that global piece. It also is a true cloud model, which, a lot of the ones that are out there at this level have, shared cloud, which is just basically saying on-premise, but you're paying for cloud hosting for it, or on-premise. So the ability to keep it, up to date, to deliver it to multiple people, and even, today where we have a lot of remote workers, makes it very easy to use. We also found that the system was just a little more intuitive, a little more mature, and really, since Oracle took it over, 3 years ago at this point, it's just actually added to that. So they've, really invested heavily in the product. So we really saw a very mature product that was able to support a global implementation, able to support, GMP manufacturing, able to support inventory, and you just don't see that at a non-SAP or Oracle level of application. That's why we really went with NetSuite.
Excellent. So how has Adaptologics helped you, Chris, anticipate your needs by providing a roadmap to commercialization?
As James mentioned, our initial implementation was focused on the base financials and budget functionality. And with that, it helps us improve our reporting, including comparisons to forecast, our consolidation processes, accounts payable and contract management, including routing purchase orders for approvals, and our SOX compliance, which is, includes automating delegation of authority and segregation of duties. And so the base platform really was designed and implemented with a view to the future, hopefully enabling us to scale the system with our business. So assuming we have positive data in our phase 3 program later this year, we'll begin planning the implementation of the supply chain modules, which will help us manage inventory, revenue, gross to net accounting, obviously all critical aspects for a commercial business.
And Lauren, starting as a commercial pharma company, how has your experience been with Adaptologics?
Yeah, so as James mentioned, we were their first client, so both of our companies have grown significantly over the last 5 years. Adaptologics and James himself actually assisted with our search for an ERP system and helped us with implementing NetSuite. And since then, we've worked with them to add additional modules to our system, including supply chain, budgeting, expense reporting, and we've also done several other upgrades. So we've really enjoyed working with them. They're extremely knowledgeable around NetSuite and specifically within the pharma industry. And we just appreciate their expertise as we continue to make changes to our system.
Excellent. So what is currently being developed at Adaptologics, James, that other companies should be on the lookout for?
We're continuing to add to kind of our deployment models. Two of the biggest areas that we're adding, and we continue to add back to all of our clients is in our approvals, which is always a big deal for Sarbanes-Oxley and for the GMP builds. We are doing extensions to our GMP model. So we're soon to become one of the basically quickest routes to a GMP validated manufacturing system that's available out there. And couple that with a scalable international ERP system. It's a pretty big deal. So we're really happy about that. And then we're adding additional audit tools. One of the things that we hear from our customers all the time is, we do provide a couple of audit reports, but there's these common themes of when the auditors come in every year, exactly what they're looking for, all of the changes to the system and so on and so forth. So we're actually working on deployment that's going to be added to our pharma bundle that'll, have all those standard reports and, have them easily accessible on a menu that we'll deploy to our customers in some of our, upgrades, as we move forward through 2021.
Well, it sounds like you're very busy keeping up with everything. Very good.
Yeah.
So everybody, thank you so much. But if there's anything else you think we should know or something we didn't address, I'll start with you, Chris. Is there anything you wanted to add?
I think we covered everything from my end. I just wanted to say thank you again for having me today, and thanks to James and the Adaptologics team for their support with our NetSuite implementation.
Thanks for sharing everything with the audience. Lauren, is there anything you wanted to add, or something we may not have addressed?
No, I think we covered everything. And similar to Chris, I just want to thank everyone today, and specifically James and his team, because we've really appreciated working with them over the years.
Thank you, Lauren. And James, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I want to say thanks to Chris and Lauren, because it's not, often, I mean, it's really great to have two customers come on and talk about this and spend their valuable time. So appreciate that and appreciate the time today.
Excellent. So audience, well, thank you for your insights. And if you go to the next slide, if you have any additional questions that you didn't put into the platform for Adaptologics, you can just reach out to them here. I'll give you a couple seconds to jot those down. But we do have some polling questions for the audience before we go, so let's go to those. So it's an open-ended question, audience. So just answer the question, do you currently have paper processes to maintain GMP, and how many contracts? So you just have to type that in and then hit submit. Do you currently have paper processes to maintain GMP, and how many contracts? And then our next question is a yes, no. So do you have the volume to warrant an automated solution? Yes or no, and hit submit. And do you think you have the volume to warrant an automated solution? Yes or no. And then our last question, audience, is also a yes or no. Are you a public company? Yes or no. And thank you for participating in our final poll. Unfortunately, we are out of time, but I want to thank the audience for attending and for participating in today's event. And I would also like to thank our sponsor, Adaptologics, for making today's educational webcast possible. You will receive an email alerting you when this webcast will be available for replay. We invite you to forward that announcement to your colleagues who may have missed today's live event. So thanks again, everyone, for joining. We will see you next time. Take care.